setting up a Trimble R8s receiver as an Autobase. So what is an Autobase? It's an internal configuration you can do through the web UI on the receiver, and basically it allows you to set the base up anywhere. The configuration is going to automatically do a here position, automatically start the base. It's going to automatically start the internal radio broadcasting corrections to the rover, and it's going to automatically record data so you can send it to Opus, or you could post-process it yourself back in TBC in the office to get a good position for the base. And once you have a good position for the base, that's going to update all the positions that the rover is taking. So all you have to do is set the base up, hit the power button, and then as long as you have the rover radio parameter set to match the base radio, really you're just starting a survey there at the rover. It'll connect and start talking, and you can take shots. So why would you use something like this? If you go out and do a lot of surveys where you're brand new surveys, base rover, but there's no control available, you're just going to set up and do your own control anyway. This is just a quick, easy way to set the base down anywhere. Turn the power on, it does the here position, starts the base, starts broadcasting. You set up the rover and start doing your measurements. Then because it's logging data and you can get an Opus position, or you can post-process that in TBC and update the base position, you end up with a RTK survey that's on state plane coordinates. So if you do a lot of jobs where you have the need to do a here position and start jobs off without control, then this is just an easy way to set it up and kind of automate that whole process. So in order to set your R8s up as an Autobase, then you need to already have a web UI connection configured. So check out our video on setting up your R8s with a web UI connection to a Windows 10 computer if you hadn't done that already. If you have, then you're all set to follow along with this video. So get your R8s, turn it on, make sure it's within about 10 feet of your computer or so, and then down in the connection spot on your computer where your Wi-Fi is or your wired connection, just click that and choose your R8s out of the list. Then left click the R8s and choose connect. Click dial, and it'll go ahead and open the port and connect up to your receiver via Bluetooth there. So once that's done, you can go ahead and key in your IP address for the receiver. If you've done this before, you know what that is. If not, you can go to your search window and type in control panel. Open the control panel and go to Network and Sharing Center. And you'll have your R8 connection, R8s connection inside your Network and Sharing Center. So just left click on that hyperlink for the R8s and then click the details box. The IP address that you need is the IP4 DNS server, 192.168.100.170 here on my computer. Yours may differ, but that's the IP address that you want to write down and use in your web browser. So I'll close that. Close this and close that again. I'm going to leave this open so I can disconnect at the end of this, but I'll minimize it now and I'll open up a web browser. I'm using Firefox. You can use whatever you want and type in that IP address. Now mine's been typed in before, so I remember it, but just type in that IP address and your computer will go ahead and hook up to the web UI. So the default password is, or default username is admin, default password is password. Both of those lowercase, or if you've changed it to something else, just type in your username and password, then click OK. And once we go ahead and log on, we'll get it set up to Autobase. So we'll start off at the top and kind of work our way down through the list of the different settings we need. The first thing we need to do is set up data logging. So we'll click on data logging and go under the default session. Just click right there on default. Check the box for enable. Then for the schedule, set it to always. Now 15 seconds is fine if you're doing Opus. If you're going to do your own static, I'd probably set it down to 1 second. Opus decimates the data to 30 seconds anyway. So if you do 1 second, you're wasting a lot of data. But if you're going to post-process in TBC, I'd probably go ahead and do 1 second. I'll leave it at 15 seconds for now. Don't need to change anything else on that screen. Just make sure it's enabled, it's always, and then set your measurement interval to whatever you want. I'll click OK there. And now the data logging is set up to log on the receiver. So the next thing we need to do is come down to receiver configuration and go to the antenna. And it's going to know it's hooked up to a R8s internal. But if you're always going to set it on a 2-meter pole or a 1.8-meter pole, or you have some fixed height that you're going to use, you can go ahead and set it to bottom of antenna mount. And if you're just using a 2-meter pole or a 2-meter fixed height bipod, you can type in that antenna height there. That's something you can also correct up in TBC, but this will save a step if you go ahead and store it in there. So I'll get my antenna set, click OK. And then under reference station, if you want to give it a name, by default it's going to call the base point CREF1 or C reference station 0001. You can type in base or whatever you want there. If you don't want to change that, you can leave it alone. I'll just call this base 001. And then click on OK down here at the bottom. You could give it a station code if you wanted to, as well as a CMR ID for the radio, that kind of thing. But or you could just leave this alone. Just a little customization there. So I'll click OK there to do that. And then I'm going to come down under General, and this is where I can set my Autobase up. So right now by default it's set to disabled, but I'm going to set it to enable hear position always, and the operating mode will be a base. So that way when we turn it on, it's going to start the base with a hear position. So I'll click OK there. And now working my way down, I'll go to the I/O configuration. And we need to set the radio up so that it knows to broadcast corrections through the radio. So I'll click on radio. It's radio CMR. If you wanted to do RTCM, you could do that. For R8s or any other Trimble receiver, I'd leave it on CMR. So under CMR, I can set it to CMRX and click OK. So now that I/O port, the radio is set to broadcast CMRX. We see over here under output. And then I just need to go to my radio, and under radio configuration, make sure it's set up as a base. So here under radio mode, it's set to transmit. If it's set to receive, just make sure you're set to transmit with no repeaters. If you're just using a base rover, if you are using a repeater, you can set it here. But I'll go with transmit, no repeaters. And then set the wireless mode. You can choose 48. It's all going to be TrimTalk V1 on this particular receiver, but you could go 4800, 8000, or 9600 baud rate. And that's all you really need to set up besides your channel. You can set that, and just make sure that you need to match your rover with the wireless mode and the current channel that you're in. All right, so that way they'll talk together. So I've got my current channel set up. I've got my wireless mode set up, so I'll click OK there. And that does it for the configuration. I've got my data logging. I've got my reference station set to work as an Autobase. And now I've got my radio set up with my I/O configuration set to broadcast out over the radio. So the last thing I need to do is store that as a power-up file. So every time I start the receiver, this file goes into effect. So I'll go back to receiver configuration, application files. So right now what I'll do is go to store current file, and I'm going to call it power_up and click OK. All right, so now the receiver is set up as an Autobase. It's going to automatically grab a hear position when I turn it on. It's going to start logging data, and it's going to start broadcasting corrections based on that hear position over the radio to the rover. So now I can close my web browser and go back down to where I have my dial-up settings and disconnect from the receiver.